Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Danielle, aka Stitcherista here on YouTube, and today is Monday, October 31st. Happy Halloween. As you saw the intro, that is a pumpkin that we bought at Costco a few years ago, and we just love it. And I filmed it one year and just saved it. So, we have lots to chat about. You know, I always say that in the videos like 5 minutes long. Anyway, let's go back. I'll try to do this in order. Saturday after I filmed, I did sit down and I stitched for a bit on the Primrose Cottage Stitches piece, on the piece of scrapbook paper, nope, on the piece of perforated paper that I had colored. So here is where I had gotten to. I was using 2 strands of thread on 18 count. This is 18 count paper, and I know you can't even hardly see that. That's better. And I was enjoying it. I enjoyed it during that time. Last night, though, I sat down to fill in the W with 2 strands of Weeks Dye Works, and I wasn't liking it. Not at all. I really do think that I need to try Sulky, which is 1.5 strands of DMC, or go back to using 1 strand of DMC, because the one piece that I did with 1 strand, I had the most joy stitching it. 2 strands, it's a little bit tough to pull the needle through with the strands. To me, that starts to become unenjoyable. Do you know what I mean? So I actually think I'm going to restart this actually on a piece of fabric, or using 1 strand. I'll just tear that out. So I have a really cool piece of pole stitches fabric. I love pole stitches. They are in the UK. They have an Etsy store and they actually ship pretty quickly. So this piece of fabric is called Stormy Skies, and it is 28 count Lugana. And I really think that this would look really good with this piece. I mean, look at it. Isn't it gorgeous? I would probably maybe use more. I would flip it over and do it this way. Isn't it so gorgeous though? Yeah. I think I may really restart it on fabric, because when I was sitting there last night and I was not enjoying stitching on the paper, I thought, why don't I just finish what I started? Why don't I go ahead and finish the Halloween basket from the Primrose Cottage Stitches book and just keep going along with those smalls, because I did enjoy stitching them and I finished it. Yesterday we wound up watching 2 movies. One when my stepdaughter was here, because football game wasn't until like 8 o'clock at night or something. We watched Goodnight Mommy on Amazon Prime. It was actually pretty good. It was odd in the beginning, but then it makes sense at the end. So if you like suspense stories, I highly recommend it. And then last night, Bill and I watched Mr. Harrigan's Phone on Netflix. We liked it. It was good. And then last night when I was stitching, I caught up on Handmaid's Tale. And then I started watching A Perfect Murder with Gwyneth Paltrow and Michael Douglas. I have that on DVD. Okay, so I did finish the stitching. Can we not, isn't not like one of the cutest finishes? So, I want to explain how I did this. This is one, I bought this, don't you love the glitter? I got this at Michael's. And what I did was I covered a piece of sticky board. I cut it to fit the inside of this. I covered it in scrapbook paper, taped that down, glued that down. Then this is scrapbook paper that I cut with one of my rotary cutters. I have a decorative edge. Ran it through my sticker maker, put that down. This, doesn't that look good? That is around this. Okay, so I don't know why I doubted myself being able to finish fabric, putting it around mat board. The best one that I use This is actually chipboard. This came when I bought scrapbook paper, but you can buy sheets of this on Amazon. I'll link it down below. It's thinner than the sticky board, and I have found I don't use any padding. I didn't use any padding on this. What I did though is I covered, when I cut this piece to size, I put a piece of similar colored cardstock to this fabric over it, so you wouldn't be able to see anything dark behind it. And then how I did it, I used stitchery tape, which is awesome. It's made for fabric. I will link that down below also. This was the cardstock that I put on this before I put the fabric on it. And then all I did, I'm going to show you. So this is one that I had done like a couple years ago, and I just took it off the board. I'm going to repurpose it. But this is the stitchery tape. So I put the tape down first, but see how I miter the corners? That's how you get the corners, or at least how I get the corners, that pointy. They're perfect. It takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it because that's what I sat down and did with this one. And does it not look fantabulous? Like, I thought it turned out really good. So then I put the stitchery tape on the back of this and just pressed it down, and it stuck there. A bow and a little button that I had. Let's go. So the next piece I'm going to stitch is, I feel, a companion piece to this. It is the Halloween quilt, using the same exact colors, and it's almost the same size. So I have more of this scrapbook paper, so I'm probably going to finish it the same way. I have another checked bow, and I'll use a different button, but I have this I got this at Michael's. So I'll again put sticky board in here. And what I'm going to stitch this one on though, so some of the finishes on that board, let's look at this again, because I was just so pleased with myself when I did this morning. I didn't have any stress or strife. It worked out very well. I think it turned out great. Okay. Some of the finishes, and Christy, Java Girl Stitches, she has stitched on this before too. 25 count Lugana. So 25 count over 2 is essentially like 12.5 count, right? Because 25 divided by 2. So I got some pewter. So I'm going to stitch this one on the 25 count using 2 strands. I know you're going to be able to see through it more to the fabric. I'll decide if I like it or not when I do it. But yeah, it worked out really well. Like I said, I don't know why I doubted myself as far as being able to finish on fabric, because I know how to do it. I've done a bunch of them. They're all around my office. I don't know why, like I said, I think I wanted it to be less time consuming than it is. The most time consuming part is mitering the corners, which literally took me, and when I do that, I use a similar floss color to the fabric, just so if by chance you don't see anything from the front, but just so you don't even try. Okay, so let's talk candles. So I love candles. I've owned a bunch of candles. I have bought tons of candles. The biggest problem I have with some candles is that they don't throw the scent enough. I bought, here's a candle I'm burning right now. See that candle way over there? That's from the grocery store. That is a $5 candle, like in the, you know, where the air freshener aisle is in the grocery store. It smells like berries. It smells really good. I said, how is it possible that a $5 candle throws the scent more than a $20 candle that I bought at Amazon did, which I couldn't smell at all until I was up on it with my nose in it. I don't know how that happens. Fucking $5 candle. Yeah. Bath & Body Works candles are also really, really good for that. So I put a couple of those on my wish list because they're like $25 a candle. Okay. So, a little Halloween story for you guys. Like I said, yeah, this video is only 10 minutes. I thought this was going to be much, much longer. Oh, here is also my rotary cutter with the decorative. I have like 4 different blades. You just unscrew this to change it. Very easy. Awesome. Okay. So, candy, when we get Halloween candy, we will get it at Costco. And we normally get the big bags. So, the big bags, we got candy on Saturday. We got a bag of chocolate assorted and then a bag of like sweet tarts and stuff like that. I want to say we spent like $32, $33 in fucking candy. So it's 2 big bags, right? Normally when we come home and we have it, we'll set it on our table we have in our kitchen. Now when I set it down, I'm someone who when I set something down and I set it out neat, I will know if you moved it because I've laid it out neat and I don't forget that. So the next day was a work day and I come out to make coffee and I see the chocolate bag. It's like scrunched up and I'm like, I know I didn't leave that like that. Or did I? Then I started to question myself. So I go over to it and I jostle it and all this candy falls on the floor and I'm like, what the fuck? Bill thought he was going to be slick and cut a slit in the bottom of the bag, get candy out of it, and then I would never know it. I was like, that motherfucker. Okay, so when he called me that day from work, I said, is there something you need to tell me? He's like, what are you talking about? Halloween candy? He busted out laughing. I was like, you're busted. You're so busted. I said, why didn't you just cut the bag open? Who cares if you want a piece of candy? Right? But I tell that story every year because, and he still reminds me of it because it was just so funny. Because he thought he was getting away with something. No, not today. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to chat with you guys about today is Halloween true crime, which is probably my favorite true crime story. It's an awful story, but it's very fitting for Halloween. So I have it on my computer because I had like typed it out when I first got into true crime. This was one of the first stories I told. So this is called the Candyman Killer. Dun, 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 right? So we know the main crux of Halloween is trick-or-treating, right? As kids, you look forward to it all year, dressing up, getting lots of candy. I know when we were kids, our costumes were mostly homemade. We didn't care. I just wanted to go out and get candy. We would have a pillowcase as our bag. My grandparents would check our candy when we got home for unwrapped ones, anything weird looking, right? All of that. There was a time, however, back in the 1970s, when parents weren't as careful and not as fearful of things like that, or even entertained the thought that someone would do something to Halloween candy that would harm kids. Yeah. That all changed in Houston, Texas in 1974, which happens to be the year I was born. So, enter Ronald Clark O'Brien. He lived in Deer Park, Texas with his wife, Danae, and they had 2 children, a son named Timothy, born in 1966, and a daughter named Elizabeth, born in 1969. Ronald was known as a decent, upstanding citizen and was an optician for a well-known optical chain in Texas. He was also very involved in his church and sang in the choir. And so many of these cases for true crime, the people seem to be church-oriented, but that doesn't seem to be helping, does it? No, it does not. Halloween 1974. Ronald and his 2 kids and a few neighborhood kids and their parents were all out trick-or-treating as a group. Ronald's son Timothy was dressed as a character from Planet of the Apes. The movie had just come out and so was a very popular choice for a Halloween costume. One of the other parents in the group was Jim, and he had his 2 kids with him, Mark and Kimberly. Ronald took his 2 kids over to Jim's neighborhood because Jim lived in a better neighborhood, and Ronald thought the whole experience would be better. Let me tell you. Okay, yeah, I wrote a little note to myself. Let me tell you. Tons of people bring their kids to our neighborhood, the neighborhood we currently live in, which I don't quite understand. I mean, it's not that big of a neighborhood. And as kids, we always went to my grandparents' neighborhood because, first of all, they wanted to see us in our costumes, and their neighborhood is much bigger than ours. So Ronald and the kids and the neighbors, they're all out. The night goes on. They're doing the normal trick-or-treat thing, going to each house, getting candy, having a good time. But then they came to a house where the lights were off. And you know, when we were kids, a house that was completely dark meant you avoided it. There was a point to that, right? They either ran out of candy, which, oh my God, we did all the time in our neighborhood. Once we got old enough and we weren't going trick-or-treating, we gave out candy for my mom, and we would always run out. We'd have to turn the lights off and go inside. So, yeah. They either ran out of candy, didn't want to give out candy, or they weren't home. So, needless to say, you didn't go up and knock on the door of a house that was completely dark. But Ronald and Jim and the kids decided they were going to try anyway, and they went up to the house and knocked on the door, and nobody answered. Now, the kids weren't fazed and were like, okay, let's go on to the next house, right? Jim and the kids moved on, but Ronald stayed behind, catching up with them a little bit later. He told Jim and the kids that he stayed to try to get the people that lived there to answer the door and get some candy. Like, what the fuck? Like, who? Why? Why would you focus on that one house when there are so many other houses to go to? So Ronald said they did eventually answer the door and gave him 6 pixie sticks to give to the kids. Now, if you don't know what a pixie stick is, it's a paper tube with flavored sugar in it, like sweet, really, really sweet and tart. And it's closed at both ends, and you have to tear it open. You have to tear it the end to open it up. You normally tear it open and pour the contents from the tube right into your mouth. So Ronald gave out the pixie sticks to the kids. They continued about 2 blocks down the street and then decided to call it a night. Once the kids got home, they did what any kid does on Halloween. They dumped out their candy to see what they got and started eating it. And OMG, I loved Halloween. I love candy. I still love candy. When I was a kid, they would call me the candy queen. I would use my allowance to buy candy. I always had candy or gum or something. Loved candy. Ronald's son Timothy wanted to eat his pixie sticks right away, but he was having trouble getting it open because it was stapled shut at the end. What? First of all, pixie sticks aren't stapled. Nope. They are like sealed. You know what I mean? Like crimped, if I could say it that way. So Ronald helped him open the pixie sticks and gave it to him. As Timothy was eating the pixie sticks, he said that it tasted really bitter and awful, so Ronald gave him some Kool-Aid to wash it down. Ronald said he thought the pixie sticks was just rotten or old. But a few minutes later, Timothy started complaining of a really bad stomach ache. He ran to the bathroom and started vomiting and convulsing. Ronald ran to the bathroom and stayed there with his son until he just went limp in his arms. He called 911 and they tried to take Timothy to the hospital, but it was too late. Timothy had died within 1 hour of eating the pixie sticks. So, of course, word got out quickly in the neighborhood and people were frightened naturally, and everyone started to think, well, there has to be a house that is giving out poison candy. So as you may expect, this caused extreme panic in the neighborhood. A lot of parents made their kids throw out their candy, and some brought their kids' candy to the police department to be inspected. An autopsy was performed on Timothy, and what they found out was that the pixie sticks he had eaten had cyanide in it. Cyanide. An alert was sent out immediately to the neighborhood saying if you have a pixie sticks, throw them out immediately. Ronald told police about handing out the pixie sticks so they were able to track them down, and luckily no other child had eaten them yet. There was one child, though, that they weren't able to track down. As Ronald said, he didn't remember who it was, that it was a kid from church. But police ended up finding the kid, getting a hold of his parents, and they checked his candy but couldn't find the pixie stick. The child was already asleep in bed at this point, so they ran upstairs to check on the child to make sure he was all right. And he hadn't eaten the pixie sticks, and they found him laying in bed holding it uneaten. Good God, dodged a bullet there, right? Apparently he had tried to open it, but because of the staple in the end of it, he wasn't able to get it open, and he gave up and fell asleep. Police opened up all of the remaining pixie sticks that they had collected, which was 5, and they discovered that they all had been replaced with pure cyanide. Oh my God, so there wasn't even like any real candy in it. It was all cyanide? Good fucking night. The 5 pixie sticks had enough cyanide in them to kill 2 to 4 adults. So Timothy is buried on November 2nd. Ronald spoke at the funeral saying that his son was now in a better place with God. Police obviously want to figure out which house gave out these pixie sticks, right? But when they asked Ronald, he said he couldn't remember which house he got them from. Now, you have to remember that they had only went 2 blocks past where Ronald had caught up with them that night, as it had started raining, remember? So it wasn't that many houses they had actually been to where the pixie sticks could have come from. So police just went to every single house Jim and Ronald and the kids had went to. However, none of them had given out pixie sticks, and there was no evidence of any pixie sticks at these houses. So police ended up walking with Ronald around the neighborhood, hoping something would jar his memory and he would remember where he got the pixie sticks from. Finally, he did remember which house they came from, and once Ronald saw the house, he conveniently started remembering more details, that the house was dark and that he had continually knocked because they weren't answering right away. Ronald told police that when the occupants of the house opened the door, all of their lights were still off and that they had only opened the door enough to stick a hand out and hand in the 5 pixie sticks, so Ronald had not seen their face. What? Sus. No. That sounds so ridiculous. Police went to the house that Ronald claimed to have gotten the pixie sticks from, and it was owned by a man named Courtney Melvin. Courtney told police that he worked at a nearby airport and that he actually had been working on Halloween night until 11 p.m., and that's why the lights were off, as he was not giving out candy at his house. And his alibi checked out. So, at this point, the police are starting to look more at Ronald. So, after looking more into Ronald and his life, police discovered that Ronald was in over $100,000 of debt, which is a lot of money now in, 2022, but in 1974, holy fuck, like that would have been a lot of money. Police also found out that Ronald had held 21 different jobs in the last 10 years because he wasn't able to hold down a job. That's a lot of jobs in 10 years. That's about 2 a year. And Ronald was even in trouble at the optical store where he worked, as he was accused of stealing from them. But this was not all. Ronald's car was about to be repossessed. He had defaulted on several bank loans, and their family home was about to be foreclosed on. What was he doing with his money? Doesn't say about that. But the nail in Ronald's coffin was when police found out Ronald had taken out $10,000 life insurance policies on both of his children in January of that same year, so about 10 months before Halloween. And then 1 month before Halloween, he took out an additional $20,000 on each child. And then just a few days before Halloween, he took out an even further $20,000 on each child, so then it totaled $60,000 per child. The insurance company actually contacted police and said that November 1st, the day after Timothy died, Ronald had called up and said how could he collect the life insurance proceeds. Ronald's wife, Danae, said she had no idea that he had taken out these policies, which in all probability, it could be true. I mean, plenty of spouses do things that the other spouse has no idea. And as if all that wasn't bad enough, a local chemical company contacted police and claimed that Ronald had come in a few days before Halloween looking to buy cyanide. Dude. However, this company, like many other chemical companies, had restrictions in place on how much you could get. They would only give you a tiny amount unless you had some type of license to purchase it. According to the chemical company, Ronald was wanting to purchase a whole lot more cyanide that was even in the pixie stick, so you got to wonder, what in the hell was he actually going to do with it? When the chemical company denied his request, he just left. So, November 5th, police arrest Ronald. He was indicted on 4 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of capital murder for Timothy's death. Ronald pled not guilty to all 5 charges. His trial began on May 5th, 1975. During the trial, there was a chemist that was friends with Ronald, and he said in 1973, so a year before this happened, Ronald was asking him about cyanide and how much could kill someone. Wow. Friends and family also noted that Ronald had an unusual interest in cyanide and its inner workings, and that he would just randomly talk about how much it would take to kill someone. Ronald's sister and brother-in-law said that at Timothy's funeral, Ronald was going around saying he was going to take this long vacation with the insurance proceeds to get through his grief of losing Timothy, and that he talked about all of the stuff he was going to buy with the money. So that seems just very weird and completely inappropriate, right? I mean, no. Even with all the evidence stacked against him, Ronald still said he was innocent and kept saying there was a psycho out there in the neighborhood giving out poisoned candy. His trial lasted for a month, and on June 3rd, 1975, the jury found Ronald guilty on all charges, having only deliberated for 46 minutes. It took the jury only 71 minutes to come up with a sentence, and he was given the death penalty. Shortly after his conviction, his wife Danae filed for divorce. Yeah, no shit, girlfriend, right? According to prison officials, Ronald was shunned by all of the inmates on death row because of what he did to Timothy. So it seems that Ronald lived out the rest of his life pretty miserably, right? So, sometimes, other prisoners will attack you for doing things to children like that. He was scheduled to be executed on August 8th of 1980. That got pushed to May 5th, 1982, and then it was pushed one final time to October 31st, 1982, the 8th anniversary of Timothy's death. The judge wanted justice so badly for this case that he claimed to have said that he would drive Ronald there himself to make sure he gets executed on the 31st. The Supreme Court wound up getting involved, and the date got pushed once again. They wanted to give Ronald the chance to appeal and get a new trial, which I don't know why. Why? He did it. So a final and fourth date was March 31st, 1984. His attorneys fought hard for his case, saying that death by lethal injection was cruel and unusual punishment. Well, guess what, Ronald? That's what your dumb ass gets. Because Timothy's death was horrific. That child died a very painful death. So Ronald was finally executed on March 31st, and he maintained his innocence until his death. A crowd of 300 people had gathered and were cheering as he was being put to death. His death was the first by lethal injection in Texas. So Danae wound up getting remarried, and her new husband adopted Elizabeth, their daughter. So at least that was a happy ending for them. It's amazing what people will do when they are up against it as far as debt. Horrible, horrific story, though. Today, I started reading a new book. I've been reading like manifestation books, like law of attraction books. But a new book by Kirsten Moglin came out called A Quiet Retreat. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. And I started reading it today while I was having breakfast. And I already like it. I love her stuff. But yeah. So I hope you guys all have a great Halloween. It's supposed to rain here. So like I said, I don't know how much candy is really going to be given out. But please be safe. If you're giving out candy, if you're taking kids around. So I hope everybody has a really good day and a good evening tonight. I am going, as soon as I clean up and get this video up, I'm going to do some stitching. I'm going to start that piece, and I'm going to watch It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, because I watch that every year and I've yet to watch it yet. So what perfect time to watch it than on Halloween. And you can see I'm wearing my essentially Halloween sweatshirt. My broom broke, so now I go fishing. Yeah, love that. So as always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.